event, Mothers and Daughters in Islam, with our speaker, Dr. Suzy Ismail. A couple of housekeeping. There is babysitting for children 4 years old and up. So if you'd like, you can send your children over. The babysitting room is here on the side. It is free. Bathrooms are towards the back, and there's another set over here on the side. And tonight when we pray Isha, we're going to, again, women will be praying up here, not downstairs. So prayer will be over here again. Tonight we hope to, inshallah, learn the duties mothers and daughters have towards one another, how they can connect, and the importance of sisterhood. Speaking of sisterhood, Dar-ul-Islah hosts weekly activities for sisters. Friday evenings there is a ladies' Halaqah that is led by Sheikha Shireen. Also on Friday evenings there is young Muslim sisters as well as Dar-ul-Islah juniors. And inshallah in the very near future there will be a Mommy and Me group that will meet once a week. The idea is to provide a safe space for moms to meet one another and spend time with their babies and infants doing story time, arts and crafts, and other activities. If you'd be interested in participating in the Mommy and Me group, there will be right in the front under the TV here, you see an information desk. Sister Rana will be there towards the end, and you can sign up with her. Please also visit our information desk if you'd like to become a member of Dar-ul-Islah. Of course, we're all a part of this community and this masjid, but becoming a member of the masjid requires filling out a brief application, and there is a yearly membership fee. I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but I can't stress to you enough how important it is for more women to become members of the masjid. It will allow you to vote in the elections, and more importantly, it will allow you to run in the elections and inshallah gain a position that will allow you to represent the needs of the sisters of Darul-Islah. So I hope you will stop by in the evening. I hope everyone will pick up an application and inshallah fill it out. We're going to begin tonight with a recitation of the Quran by Huria Bagashra.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والوالدات يرضعن أولادهن حولين كاملين لمن أراد أن يتم الرضاعة وعلى المولود له رزقهن وكسوتهن بالمعروف لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده وعلى الوارث مثل ذلك فإن أرادا فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما وإن أردتم أن تسترضعوا أولادكم فلا جناح عليكم إذا سلمتم ما آتيتم بالمعروف واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله بما تعملون بصير بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا إما يبلغن عندك الكبر أحدهما أو كلاهما فلا تقل لهما أف ولا تنهرهما وقل لهما قولا كريما واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة وقل رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Mahin Latif is going to do the translation.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Surah Al-Baqarah. Mothers will breastfeed their offspring for 2 whole years for those who wish to complete the nursing of their child. The child's father will provide reasonable maintenance and clothing for the mother during that period. No one will be charged with more than they can bear. No mother or father should be made to suffer for their child. The father's heirs are under the same obligation. But if both sides decide, after mutual consultation and consent, to wean a child, then there is no blame on them. If you decide to have your children nursed by a wet nurse, it is permissible as long as you pay fairly. Be mindful of Allah and know that Allah is all-seeing of what you do. Surah Al-Isra. For your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him, and honor your parents. If one or both of them reach old age in your care, never say to them even nor yell at them. Rather, address them respectfully. And be humble with them out of mercy and pray, My Lord, be merciful to them as they raised me when I was young.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Please welcome a few of the Dar-ul-Islah juniors and YM sisters who will be performing a short skit for us. This skit was written by Reem Abu Ghanba and Safa Arain.
Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, we will now be starting, inshallah. 3, 2, 1, action.
Hey, Mom, can I ask you something? So, I was wondering if I put my friend on the telly, some video games and things like that. I don't remember that. Ah, but the one that taught me how to survive the zombie apocalypse. Oh my God, Mom, you do this every single time. You never let me go anywhere or do anything. You don't let me do anything or go anywhere. Please, please, please let me go.
I already told you. It's at her house. I don't know the girl or her family. I can't let you go. I'm sorry.
This is so unfair. You do this every single time I ask you to do anything. You just want me to rot in this house and die with no friends. Do you not care about me?
I already told you the reason why. Stop complaining and go to your room.
That reason doesn't even make any sense.
I said, stop answering back and go to your room.
It's now the next day, and the daughter is now with her friends, and they're going to talk about the situation. This is what they had to say.
Ugh, my mom is so annoying.
My mom too. She literally never lets me do anything.
For real, bro. Literally just yesterday, I asked her if I could go to Jenna's house on Saturday, and she said no, because she doesn't know them. Like, what kind of reason is that?
They want us to live with them every minute of the day. They just don't understand that we also need a little freedom sometimes too. Like going to a friend's house isn't going to do anything.
Exactly. And if we say something that's not pleasing to them or they don't want to hear, they make it seem like we've gone on the wrong route. I don't get it.
Right? I can't wait to grow up. Then they can't tell me what to do.
Me too.
They never even give us proper reasons. Like, how are you going to protect me from everything all the time?
And then they always use the same excuse. Oh, we didn't do that when we were your age. Like, okay. Times change. We have different things now and different opportunities arise. Like, life doesn't stay the same forever.
It's really annoying, and they never get what we're talking about.
Anyways, bro, I gotta go to class. See you later.
The same day, the mom is now having coffee with her friend, and this is what they had to say.
Assalamu alaikum. How's it going?
I'm good. A little exhausted keeping up with my children.
Tell me about it. I had an argument with my daughter last night, and it's still bugging me today. As much as you want them to enjoy themselves in life and be happy, there's some concerns as a mother I have to consider, but they just don't get that.
I know, we can't expect them to understand our concerns as moms. They're still very young, and their perspectives and things is completely different than ours.
They think they got their life so figured out.
I can definitely relate to your frustration. Have you tried sitting down with her and understanding her concerns? Maybe try coming to a middle ground.
I see what you mean. Thanks for your advice, Sophia. Inshallah, I will definitely try that. I appreciate it.
The problem here is that both sides, the parents and the daughter, feel that the other side is not understanding them. And the only way to get through that is to talk through and have a proper conversation. And this is what the mother and the daughter will do now.
Assalamu alaikum, Rania. How was school today? Are you still upset about yesterday's conversation? Well, I've been thinking about it too, and it's also been bugging me. Why don't we try and have a conversation about it?
Okay. I just feel like every time I ask you to do something, you never let me go and you never let me do anything. And all my friends are going out with their friends and it's leaving me out. I feel very left out. And I feel like it's unfair. Everyone else is doing it and having fun while I can't. I feel like that's really mean of you.
I understand now, and I feel sorry for you. My concern is your safety. I don't know the girl or her family, so I'm not sure I could trust them to take care of you while you're alone there at their house and I'm not there. Why don't we try and come to a middle ground? How about tomorrow after school? I meet with your friend and her family, and then I'll decide if you can go or not. Seems fair?
All right, that seems fair. Thanks, Mom.
That concludes our skit. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much, and clap it up for them.
Now I'd like to welcome Dr. Suzy Ismail. Dr. Ismail is the founding director of Cornerstone, a nonprofit faith-based communication intervention organization with several locations around the world that focus on youth, family, marriage, identity, socio-emotional wellness, and relationship rebuilding. She is the author of many books, including Modern Muslim Marriage, 9 to 5, and When Muslim Marriage Fails. These are going to be available for sale. There are several more copies, so if you're interested at the end to make a purchase, they are available for sale. She specializes in educating and empowering women, youth, and vulnerable populations by presenting a range of workshops, lectures, diversity seminars, and corporate trainings, both nationally and internationally. She currently resides in Princeton, New Jersey with her husband and 3 children. We are very happy to have her here at Dar-ul-Islah for a second time, this time to speak on our topic of mothers and daughters in Islam. We will have a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end of her talk. If you have any questions, you can text. There should be a number coming up on this screen, but in case it doesn't show up, I'm going to say the number. So if you want to open up your reminder app or your notepad or something, here's the number. I'll say it twice. It's 551-333-9026. So I'm going to say it one more time. If you want to send in questions, you can text this number. 551-333-9026. We're going to do our best to address as many of the questions as we can in the time we have left at the end. Let's welcome Dr. Suzy Ismail.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So, mashallah, this is such a beautiful gathering. The organizers did an incredible job with decorating the place. So, a huge takbir for the organizers. Jazakumullahu khair. I always love coming to sisters' talks because there's a special sense of pride that I think we take in beautifying spaces, in gathering with one another and recognizing that the beauty is not just in terms of the content that inshallah we'll hopefully gain, but that the beauty really resides in the sisterhood of all of us together and in that connection that we can build. So I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal surrounds this gathering with His angels of mercy, and I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal allows us all to benefit, whether through knowledge, through sisterhood, through connecting, or through simply enjoying a few hours in one another's company in the house of Allah. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So let's dive into the topic that we're going to talk about. First of all, where are the young sisters who did that incredible skit? Are they here, or did they ran off? Are they here? MashaAllah, wherever you are, great job. I felt like you really captured that relationship between mothers and daughters when things get a little difficult sometimes, when moms and their daughters have trouble seeing eye to eye. And oftentimes in these gatherings, when we talk about the mother-daughter relationship or the mother-child relationship, we focus quite a bit on the importance that is placed in the Quran, in our deen, in the sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the role of the mother. And as much as we cannot deny or doubt the important place that the mother holds within the family unit, within the relational aspect, within the Quran, within our faith, we also want to understand the role of the daughter and what the daughter may also go through in building this relationship, sustaining this relationship, and what we see on both sides. So first of all, let's begin with an understanding of why in our deen we all know, and I'm sure we've all been told this by our own mothers probably, the importance of the mother. And the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the man came to him and asked, who should I be the kindest to or most respectful to or the best to? And the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam answered, your mother. And then when the man asked again and said, okay, then who? Then the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam again said, your mother. And when the man asked the third time, and then who? And again the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, your mother. And then your father. So why is this such an important core aspect in our deen? And why does the mother play such an important role? It begins from before the day that we are born. It begins from before we enter the womb of the mother even. We know that the rahim, or the womb of the mother, comes from the same root word of rahmah. Rahmah, one of the 99 names of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. That rahim, that is the same root word that describes the womb of the woman. Why? Because it's in that rahim that the fetus is formed, that it is in that place of mercy, in that place of compassion, in that place of safety, in that place of warmth, that the child is carried. And the child is carried for 9 months. And there is a reason why Allah Azza wa Jal in His hikmah made it a 9-month journey. And we know for those children who are born premature, who are born maybe at the 6th month mark or the 7th month mark, when they haven't completed the stages of growth in the womb, that there will often have to be an artificial incubator, or there will have to be some form of sustenance before the child can function on his or her own. So in that rahim, in that journey of 9 months, we see that Allah Azza wa Jal causes the woman's body to change, causes the response of not just the physical aspect, but the emotional aspect, the mental aspect. And today we are starting to see even the biological transformation that occurs within the womb, and the way that cells will gravitate from the fetus to the womb of the mother and back and forth, creating almost like a protective biological shield that winds up allowing for immunity as the child grows later on. And we see that connection with that umbilical cord. We often hear, as we grow older, the importance of silat al-rahim, right? The thread of the womb. And that first thread of the womb that we experience is through that umbilical cord that connects us with our mothers. Because it's through that umbilical cord, through that sila, that thread that connects us, that we receive our sustenance, that for those 9 months we are being formed, protected, and kept in that safe space. Now, recognizing that this is just the first journey of the connection between mother and the child, we also know the difficulty in the process of labor. And we know again today, scientific studies tell us that the amount of pain that a woman's body endures during the process of labor is the equivalent of breaking every bone in someone's body and then resealing them or healing them. And so we see that the amount of pain, if we were to look at it not through the miraculous view of what it means to be a mother, it almost seems like it would not be sustained by the human body. Yet Allah Azza wa Jal in His infinite wisdom and His knowledge causes this 9-month journey to be a journey of difficulty, of strife, of emotional ups and downs, but also in many ways a journey of joy, a journey of contentment, a journey of tawakkul. Because in those 9 months, and for all of us who have experienced motherhood in the form of carrying a child in our womb, we know that there can be so many moments of question marks. What is my child going to be like? Will I give birth to a healthy child, or will my child have physical struggles, physical difficulties? What will happen with my child? And we know the amount of dua that we make during that period of time. When we look at one of my favorite examples in the Quran, when we see again, there's many examples of mothers in the Quran, but one of my favorite examples is the example of the mother of Maryam. And we see in Surah Ali Imran that in that carrying of Maryam alayha salam in the womb of her mother, Imra'at Imran, the wife of Imran, made a dua while she was carrying the baby Maryam in her womb, and that dua was to dedicate what was in her womb to the service of Allah. When we think back to the dua that we may have made as we carried our children, what was our dua? Was it a dua for success in dunya? Was it a dua for our children to be the coolness of our eyes? قَرَّةَ عَيْنَيْنَا. Was it a dua for the children to be able to succeed in dunya and in akhirah? Whatever those du'as were that we articulated while our children were in our womb, were what our hearts desired in the hopes of raising our children in a way that would be pleasing to Allah, in a way that would allow them to experience a sense of gratitude, a sense of contentment, a sense of happiness. But also recognizing that our children, we are reminded in the Quran, Al-Mal wal-Banuna zinatul hayat ad-dunya. In Surah Al-Kahf, we're told that our wealth and our children are but an adornment in our life. And we are reminded that just as our wealth as an adornment may be a test, our children may also be a test. And so the blessing in having our children, the blessing in carrying our children in our wombs, is that when we are carrying them in our wombs during that process, when we are filled with hopes, when we are filled with dreams, when we are filled with different ad'iyah, we are also putting all of our trust in Allah. That there is an element of tawakkul, of recognizing that there is very little that we can do, that there is very little that remains in our hands in terms of the outcome of our children. We recognize that our tarbiyah is an important part of our children's journey, but we also recognize that hidayah comes from Allah. Allahu yahdi man yasha. And we see this in so many examples in the Quran. The son of the Prophet Nuh, for instance, where the Prophet Nuh as a father did his utmost to call his son to La ilaha illallah, to call him to belief, and yet his son turned him away and rejected him. So as we carry our children in our wombs as mothers and we make these dreams and these hopes, subhanAllah, upon giving birth to our children, we see one of the miracles of Allah is that the eyesight of a newborn child in the starting period of time of development is only 6 inches. Meaning, a child can essentially, or an infant can essentially only see the distance from their eyes when they are in the crook of their mother's arms nursing to the face of the mother. And so not only do our children, when they're in the womb as infants, not only do they hear our voices and recognize our voices as the first sound that becomes salient to them, but upon being born into this world, as their vision begins to develop, they are spending a great deal of time only being able to see 6 inches away from their face. And as we hold our infants, whether we are nursing, whether we are giving them the bottle, but as we're holding them in the crook of our arms, this is their view, this is their vision. And again, there is a reason for this. Because Allah Azza wa Jal has created the mother as a rahmah for the child. Just as our children can also be a rahmah. But that is not to say that as mothers we are perfect. That is not to say that as mothers, we will not struggle, we will not have our own tests and questions, just like the girls showed us in the skit. Times where we may not know how to respond to our children, times where we may not see eye to eye with our daughters. And this is where I want us all to take a moment, those of us who are mothers, those of us who are daughters, to think of our own mothers, to think about what they did in raising us with the intention to please Allah, with the intention to raise us in the best way possible, with the intention to give us that rahmah, that compassion in our lives. But I also want us to think about those moments when they couldn't or when they didn't. Maybe there were moments, maybe there are moments when our mothers are struggling maybe in marriage, struggling maybe with her own family, struggling maybe with acclimation, struggling maybe with mental health difficulties, struggling maybe with not knowing how to be the mother that she wants to be. And I want us, while thinking of those moments, again, whether we are the daughters that are here or the mothers that are here, I want us to forgive our mothers. To forgive our mothers for sometimes not knowing. To forgive our mothers for those moments where they may have been harsh with us because their cup was too full, but not full of positivity. Too full of their strife, of their pain, of their difficulty. I want us to forgive our mothers for those moments where they maybe tried to understand but just couldn't. For those moments where they were too preoccupied with difficulties that were going on in their life to be able to recognize or understand or empathize or sympathize with our difficulties. Because as mothers, we have all been there, and as daughters, we have all probably been there as well. So when we turn to the Quran and we look to the examples of mothers who have struggled, we begin to recognize just how important this journey is and why that elevated position that mothers have, that promise that Jannah lies at the feet of mothers, why it exists, why it's part of our deen. So we talked about the mother of Maryam, alayha salam, who dedicated her child to the service of Allah. And this was at a time when females were not really taught the monotheistic faith, when females were not really brought up in the temples to be raised religiously, to learn about the deen. But the mother of Maryam, the wife of Imran, was so grateful that she was carrying a child despite that she had been older in years, that her age was advanced. She was so grateful that she made this dua, made this promise, and when she gave birth to Maryam alayha salam, we see in Surah Ali Imran the verse in which she says that she has given birth to the female and the female is not like the male. And in this moment we recognize that Allah Azza wa Jal responds to this plea that the mother of Maryam makes, saying that He has accepted her onto His service. That despite the female not being like the male within the societal context, within that period of time where the females were not normally raised in religiosity, were not normally raised to learn the monotheistic faith, Allah Azza wa Jal accepted her. Why? Because we see the dua of the mother. The sincerity in that dua of wanting that which was best for her daughter despite knowing the perils and the trials that the daughter might face, despite knowing that her daughter was not like the males of that time. Think about your own journeys. As daughters, think about those times where your mother may have said, "You can't go to your friend Jannah's house because I don't know her." Think about those times as mothers where you may have thought hard and long about what was best for your daughter, and it may not have been aligned with what was contextually occurring at the time. And think about the mother of Maryam, who knew that contextually, at that time, that period in history, women were not educated. But she also knew that this was a path that was pleasing to Allah. She also knew that this was a commitment and a dua that she had made, and so she carried on. And we know that Maryam alayha salam was raised in the mihrab, the most honorable part of the temple, raised with that commitment to faith, raised in a way that when her uncle Zakaria would enter upon her in the mihrab and he would see the fruits of summer there in the middle of winter, and he would see the fruits of winter there in the middle of summer, and he would ask Maryam alayha salam, where does this come from? And Maryam would say, هذا من عند الله. That Allah could say, kun fayakun. This comes from Allah. He can say, be, and it will be. This is a daughter that is raised by a mother who had commitment, who had faith. And so we see the commitment and the faith passed on to the daughter. despite the mother not being with her, despite the sacrifice of the mother, leaving the daughter in the mihrab, having her uncle Zakaria kaffalaha being her guardian. Think about your own mother. Did she have to leave you in the care of others as she worked outside of the home in order to make ends meet? Did she have to leave you at times, drop you off maybe at the Islamic school that you didn't want to go to? Did she have to enlist the care of aunts maybe and grandparents? Did she enlist the care of caregivers? Think about your own mother and maybe the sacrifices that she made with the intention of pleasing Allah, despite the difficulty that you may have encountered in that process. And what is so beautiful about the relationship and the understanding of the way that the commitment of the mother of Maryam was passed on to her, we see that Maryam alayha salam also became a mother. And she became a mother who withstood pain, who withstood difficulty, who withstood so much for the sake of following the commandment of Allah, for the sake of giving birth to a prophet, the Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And we see the pains of labor highlighted in what we understand of Maryam alayhi salam's journey. When she is in the throes of labor and she is all alone, when she is being tested in that moment of difficulty, and she calls out to Allah and says, "Ya laytani mitti qabla hadha wa kunti nasyan mansiya." Oh, if only I had passed before this difficulty, if only I had passed before this and had been of those who were forgotten. She is a woman in labor, a mother about to give birth. For us as mothers, have we experienced those moments of difficulty with our own children, in our own lives, where maybe we have said, "Oh, if only I had passed before this difficulty, if only I had been of those who were forgotten." This is part of our legacy as mothers, that we will go through difficulty, that we will be tested. And the test begins. It begins when that child is in our womb, when we have that difficulty sleeping, when we have that difficulty eating, when we see the stretch marks upon our body, when we go through the pain of labor, just like Maryam alayhi salam experienced that pain. And yet we see the response that Maryam alayhi salam receives. Nudiya min tahtiha, a voice calls to her from beneath her, and the voice says, "La tahzani," do not be sad. Do not be And when the voice calls her and tells her, "Do not be sad," this is not a sense of empathy, words of comfort just for Maryam alayha salam, but these are words of comfort for every mother. For every mother who has gone through difficulty, who has gone through pain, who has experienced the pain of labor, who has given birth, we are reminded in that verse in the Quran, "Do not be sad." And yet we see that the struggle of Maryam alayha salam as a mother, we see the commitment and the faith of her mother being passed on to her, is not the only example of motherhood that we see in the Quran. We see the beautiful example of sacrifice and motherhood in Hajar radiallahu anha, in the mother of Ismail alayhi salam, a mother who was also tested, a mother who gave birth to an infant who was prayed for, an infant who Ibrahim alayhi salam made sincere dua for. And we see that it was not just Ibrahim alayhi salam that is tested in his attachment to that of the dunya, tested in a way where that which he prayed for, that which he loved the most, is removed from him. When he is commanded to leave Hajar radiallahu anha and Ismail alayhi salam in the desert. But we see that it was Hajar radiallahu anha who was also tested. A mother who carried her infant, who carried her newborn and walked behind Ibrahim alayhi salam as they headed towards the desert. And she asked Ibrahim alayhi salam, "Why are you leaving us in the desert?" And Ibrahim alayhi salam did not answer. And she asked again, "Why are you leaving us in the desert?" And again, Ibrahim alayhi salam did not answer. And then a third time she asked and she said, "Is this a commandment from your Lord?" And Ibrahim alayhi salam answered in the affirmative. And Hajar radiallahu anha, another woman of faith, a mother who had that sense of tawakkul, her response to Ibrahim alayhi salam was, "Surely our Lord will protect and provide for us." And so she enters into the desert. And as any mother's heart knows, the cries of her infant that begin to echo as she sits in the dry land. The cries of her infant pierce at her heart. But Hajar radiallahu anha does not simply sit beside her infant and cry. She does not despair. She does not give up hope. And this is where Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran reminds us, لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Not for a moment, not for a second in this hardship does this mother lose hope. So she hears the cries of her infant and she doesn't sit still. 7 times back and forth between the mountains of Safa and Marwa, she walks, running at times to reach the top of the mountains and look out for that water. And yet in every step, she never doubted that Allah Azza wa Jal would protect them and would provide for them. She never doubted that they would be okay. She knew with tawakkul, she knew with firm commitment, with firm faith, as only a mother's heart knows, that her child would be protected. That this was a test as we would all be tested. And that the true mark of passing this test is being able to have that sabr that is an active form of sabr. Meaning not simply sitting and wailing and bemoaning the difficulty of the circumstances, but taking action. Taking action in what is known today as is-sa'i. And the word sa'i means to strive. The act of going back and forth 7 times between Safa and Marwa, a path that is tread by millions year after year after year to commemorate the dedication of a mother, the faith of a mother, the commitment and tawakkul of a mother as her infant son cried. And we know that it was after that 7th time, that 7th traversing between those 2 mountains, that the foot of the infant Ismail alayhi salam hit the earth and the Zamzam well sprung from that earth. A well that has continued to run for how many years, how many decades, how long after the mother and her son have been buried and gone. And this is another guidance for us as mothers, a recognition that yes, the tests will come and the tests will be difficult, and that maybe we will be tested in our marriages and we may become single mothers. Mothers who are raising our children alone, and the Quran gives us the example of this. And maybe we are tested in other ways. Maybe our test as mothers do not come in the form of giving biological birth. Maybe we are mothers in other ways. Mothers to our sisters' children, mothers to the children of the community, mothers to the children that we teach in classrooms, mothers to those around us. And we have this example in the Quran as well. When we see Asya, radiallahu anha, the wife of Fir'aun, Asya, who was a woman of faith and commitment, who did not biologically give birth to children of her own. But she had a connection with another mother, the mother of Musa alayhi salam. And the journey of the mother of Musa alayhi salam is incredibly beautiful. And we see the narration and the reminder of her journey in the Quran in Surah Taha. So often when we reference Surah Taha, we reference the dua of Musa alayhi salam. When he is commanded by Allah to commit to a difficult task, when he is commanded to go to speak to Fir'aun, and he feels that this is going to be very hard, and he turns to Allah and he makes the beautiful dua that we all recite today before any difficulty, before any challenge, before any test. رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Asking Allah to ease for him his task, to loosen the knot from his tongue, to open his chest so that he may be understood. But we see in the verses that follow this beautiful dua, we see that the Prophet Musa alayhi salam asks Allah Azza wa Jal for him to take on this task, but to not take it on alone. And he asks that Allah gives him a wazir, that gives him someone who can be beside him, his brother Harun. So he turns to someone within his family, the son of his mother, his brother, and he asks that Harun go with him on this task so that they may remember Allah together, so that they may call out to Allah together, so that he may be supported in this difficult journey with his family member. And what is so beautiful is that when Allah Azza wa Jal responds to the ask of Musa alayhi salam, he says, your request has been granted. And he reminds the Prophet Musa alayhi salam of requests in the past. And he reminds him of the request of his mother. Reminding Musa alayhi salam in Surah Taha of how when his mother had feared for his well-being when his mother had feared at a time when infant sons were being killed by Fir'aun. When she had that fear and she turned her heart, she turned her face towards Allah with tawakkul, and she was commanded to place her infant son in the river. She did so. She did so despite the understanding that this would normally be one of the most difficult things to do, to take a child and leave them in the river. And the river led the infant Musa alayhi salam directly to the doorstep of Fir'aun. But it was there that he was received by another mother. Not a biological mother, but Asya, the wife of Fir'aun, who took the infant Musa in, and despite all of the odds, despite being in the house of the one who tortured, the one who was committing great evil in the world, Asya cared for Musa alayhi salam, brought him up as her own child, and her mother and his mother came back to him as his wet nurse, as the one that would nurse him, so that Allah Azza wa Jal did not deny the mother of Musa alayhi salam the opportunity to be with her child, although it may not have been in the form that she imagined, in the way that she pictured, but it was in a way that was much more beautiful, in a way that would change the course of history, in a way that Musa alayhi salam would be of those who were chosen to carry the message of La ilaha illallah. And despite the hardships that Asya experienced, again as a woman of faith, a woman of commitment, as she was tortured by Fir'aun, her husband, as she felt the pain of that torture and she called out to Allah, and Allah showed her her house in Jannah, and the pain fell away, and a smile was etched on her face despite the torture she went through. And this is again guidance to us as mothers, recognizing that things may not always be the way we imagine them with our children, that our daughters may not follow the path that we have etched out for them, that our daughters may go through struggles that we can only imagine, that we as mothers may go through struggles that cause us to have difficult relationships with our daughters. But we have these examples in the Quran to learn from them, to understand that it's not meant to be an easy journey, that the journey of motherhood, the journey of being in that relationship, and particularly mothers and their daughters, is one that has great reward because it's not an easy one. Because it has great reward because of the difficulty and the struggle we will go through. Now, what does it mean to be a daughter? And how do we carry ourselves as daughters in relationship to our mothers, knowing what our mothers have experienced, what our mothers have struggled with? First of all, as daughters, and every single one of us in this room here is a daughter. As daughters, we must learn how to unpack our own baggage. We must learn how to face our past and recognize that maybe our own mothers had their difficulties. Maybe our own mothers didn't know how to connect with us. Maybe our own mothers had their own struggles, and we must learn how to recognize those struggles, understand them, and forgive them. Forgive our mothers, because if we don't, we will carry that pain into raising our own daughters. And so we as daughters need to take that step back and understand where our own mother's pain may be coming from. It's so easy today in Western therapy and Western counseling sessions for young people to hear things like, if your family is toxic, cut them off. You don't need to be around toxic people. You don't need a toxic relationship. And Allah Azza wa Jal, in His infinite wisdom, knowing that there will come that time in our lives and in our worlds and in our society when children are turned against their parents. This is why in the Quran the commandment to be good to our parents is so often referenced. To lower the wing of humility to our parents is so often referenced. The reminders of our mother carrying us in her womb is so often referenced. The nursing of the child is so often referenced, because there will come that time where this dunya, where our society, where our culture will tell you, turn away from your mother if she's not healthy for you. Turn away from your mother if she's not good for you. Turn away from your mother if she's toxic. And Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, do not neglect your mother. Silat al-Rahim, that connection of the womb, particularly when it comes to the mother. Where do we see this? In the example of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha. As a daughter who was raised primarily by her father, whose mother had passed away when she was a young girl. As a daughter who recognized the importance of being good to the parents, birr al-walidain. And it's so important for us as both daughters and mothers to understand what this birr is. To be good to our parents, to be kind to our parents, to not say uff to our parents. But will there be moments where we cannot obey our parents? Yes. And this is important to understand, because so often in our marriage counseling sessions at Cornerstone, for example, we will find husbands and wives locked in difficulty because husbands may say something like, my mother has said to me that, I have to do X, Y, Z. And despite this X, Y, Z harming the wife, the husband will say, well, I have to obey my mother. This is not what our Quran says. This is not what the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam guides us towards. Because we know that being good to parents, being kind to parents, does not mean breaking the level of obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal, harming someone else, being oppressive in our relationship towards someone else, or treating others in a way that's displeasing to Allah. So as mothers, we also want to realize the limitations of our relationships with our children. And as daughters, we want to realize and understand where our mothers are coming from. So often we see in relationships between husband and wife, when the husband is not providing the emotional support or the connection or the empathy maybe that the wife is seeking, so often as mothers we turn to our children and we expect to find that empathy and that connection in our children. This can be very dangerous because we can start to transfer emotions that are meant to be connected with our life partner, with our spouse. We start to transfer expectations of care, expectations of love to our children. We can also find ourselves becoming controlling in that dynamic, where our parenting becomes one of helicoptering, constant oversight, not wanting to let the child go. And so we hold on to them so that even when the child enters into marriage, we struggle to accept the new person in our child's lives because we feel like we have ownership or possessiveness over the child. And this is why, again, we are told in the Quran that our children are an adornment. They are an amana. They are a trust. They are not a possession. But as children, it is still incumbent upon us to provide that goodness, that care, that kindness towards our parents, and particularly towards our mothers. Again, when we see Fatima radiallahu anha, and we see her relationship towards her living parent, towards the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we see that between the two of them, there was a sense of reciprocity in terms of respect. What does that mean, reciprocity in terms of respect? When the girls were doing their skit up here, and when the mom and the daughter finally decided to have that talk, they talked about finding a middle ground. They listened to each other. They heard what the other had to say. So often as parents and as mothers, when our children come to us and ask something of us, when our daughters say, I want to go here, I want to wear this, I want to do this, our response may be coming from a place of our own baggage. It may be coming from a place of our own views. It may be coming from a place where we don't want to explain, we don't want to listen, we just want to respond, and we say no. And when they say why, we say because I said so. But we never see this type of exchange between the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha. We see that when the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam would enter into a room and Fatima radiallahu anha would be sitting in the chair, he would head towards her and kiss her on the forehead first. When the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting in a room and Fatima radiallahu anha would enter, he would arise from his seat and ask her to sit in his place. And so we see how this reciprocity of respect really showed in the relationship when years later, when Fatima radiallahu anha was in her early teen or tween years, and she was standing by the door of their home and she saw the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a hill, prostrating in prayer. And as he went down into sujood, the kuffar surrounded him and reached into the belly of a dead camel and pulled out the guts of that dead camel and began to throw the filth upon the back of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Fatima radiallahu anha, seeing this, ran from the home and went up the hill and began to clean the filth from the back of her father as the tears streamed down her face. And she sat beside her father, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and waited for him to finish his prayer. And when he finished his salah, he turned to his daughter. And he didn't rebuke her. He didn't tell her you should go back to the home. He didn't tell her this isn't a place for a young girl, you shouldn't be here. He wiped her tears, and he kissed her on the forehead. And he told her, do not be sad, for surely our Lord will allow your father to be victorious. And in that moment, we see a parent emotionally validating a child. In that moment, we see a parent reassuring and comforting his daughter. Let's think about our relationship with our daughters. Let's think about our relationship with our mothers. Have you, as a daughter, ever encountered difficulty, shed tears about that difficulty, turned to your mother with the tears in your eyes, and heard, instead of the comforting words that you yearn for, instead heard, stop crying, don't be a baby, what are you crying about? Say Alhamdulillah, you have so much, be grateful. Mothers, this is not the example of parenthood that we have in our deen. Daughters, in that moment, as difficult as it may be, as hard as it may be to hear those words that are not validating, understand that this may be what your own mothers grew up with. That this may be coming from a place of their hurt and their difficulty and their struggles. That this is not intentionally worded in a way to hurt you or harm you. That it is simply coming from a well of pain and what maybe our own mothers knew growing up. I cannot tell you how many times we have children who sit in our offices, families that are broken, children that are struggling, parents that can't connect with them. And when we talk to the children and we ask them what's wrong, teens and tweens and young adults even, and they say, I've never felt like my parents loved me. I've never felt like my mother loved me. And when we ask the child, why? How could that be? Of course your mother loves you, and the response so often is she never says, I love you. She never says, good job. Anything that I do is met with criticism. That's not love. And when we turn to the mother, when we turn to the parents and we say, your child doesn't feel loved, so often the parents with tears in their eyes, so often the mother will say, I cook every meal for this ungrateful child. I drive this child to every soccer practice. I go shopping and I pick out the clothes. And here we see a mother who truly does love her child, but is loving her child with the language of service. I do, I do, I do. And the child says, I just want to hear those words. The child is speaking the language of affirmation. And if a child grows up in the home, particularly here in the US, where the language of affirmation is the primary language of our tweens and teens and young adults as they grow up in this culture, if they are not receiving that language of affirmation from their own mothers, then where do you think they will seek it? Then where will they go to find it? They will go to Instagram and look for those likes. They will go to Jannah's house and want to hang out there because it feels more welcoming with a friend. They will go online, and God forbid, they may go even further in relationships that are not pleasing to Allah, seeking that affirmation. And so daughters, sometimes it is up to us to also help our parents, to help our mothers understand what we need. Because they may feel that they are giving us what we need. Our physiological needs, a roof over our head, a warm bed to sleep in, a meal on the table, a chance to be educated, a chance to be strong in our personality. Maybe these are the needs that our own mothers never had met. Maybe these are the needs that when our mothers grew up, they wanted this. And now they are giving this to you and saying, here, be grateful, be happy. And yet you, as a daughter, may still feel like something is missing. You, as a daughter, may feel that love isn't there, that connection isn't there. That your mother maybe focuses more on the biryani she's cooking or the mahshi she's making or the dishes she's washing than the time that you want her to spend with you, but she doesn't know. She doesn't know because as daughters so often, we bury those feelings. We don't talk about them with our mothers. And as we saw in the skit, and this is why I loved it so much, the girls talk to one another. My mom is so annoying, she's so difficult. The mothers talk to one another. These kids, they're driving us crazy. But how often do we sit down and talk to each other? How often do we sit down and tell our mothers, I need to hear you say that I am beautiful. I need to hear you say that you love me for who I am, not for the grades that I get, not for the actions that I do, not that you love me when I'm a good girl, and that love goes away when I act in a way that's not pleasing to you. Our mothers need to hear this because as mothers, we too need reminders. as mothers, we too forget sometimes. As mothers, we may be mothering from our own experiences. And as daughters, we also need reminders. Reminders to have that kindness and that compassion towards our mothers. To remember the rahim that they carried us in. The womb of mercy and compassion that they carried us in for 9 months. To remember the pain and the difficulty that our mothers have gone through in birth, in labor. To remember, despite it not being stored in our long-term memory, but to dig deep. And to remember even the visceral feeling of being in the arms of our mother and being able to see with our eyes the mother's face as the source of comfort. And as we remind ourselves as daughters of these aspects of our mother's journeys, our hearts will soften. Our hearts will soften and we will understand. And we will find it in ourselves to sit and to talk with our mothers. But as mothers, we also have to listen. We have to be receptive, and we have to understand that as Ali radiallahu anhu said, that we should not raise our children in the same way that we were raised, because it is a generation that differs from our generation. Our children today are going to face challenges. Our daughters today are going to face challenges that we never had to face. That growing up, we didn't have these devices. We didn't have the social media. We didn't have the pressures of living in a world where it's constantly about what you see and your looks and the comparisons that exist. We had different pressures. And in understanding that what our daughters go through is different than what we've gone through, what our sons go through is different than what we have gone through, our brothers have experienced, and our own fathers experience, recognizing that we must inhabit the skins of others in order to understand. We must, for moments in our lives, take that time to step into not just the shoes, but to step into an understanding of what our children go through. And as children, we also need to step into an understanding of what our parents go through, and particularly our mothers. So I know I'm coming to the end of my time, and we definitely want to leave time for question and answer. But I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal allows us all as women to understand the important role that we play in the lives of our mothers as daughters. I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal allows all of us as mothers, whether biological mothers, mothers in the community, mothers to our sisters' children, mothers to the children that we teach. I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal gives us the tawakkul of Maryam alayha salam, the active sabr and sa'i of Hajar radiallahu anha, the ability to connect with others as Fatima radiallahu anha did consistently. And I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal preserves our community and allows us as sisters to lift one another up and to never be of the community that whispers and causes fitna speaking about the children of others, but instead to together truly be a village in which we are connecting and uplifting one another. Jazakumullahu khair.
Takbir. Dr. Ismail. Before we move on to the Q&A, if you didn't get a chance to text, we will take questions live. But before we do that, we have a couple of giveaways that we are going to do. I'm going to ask Dr. Ismail to pick, these are the names from registration. So we're going to have Dr. Ismail pick 11 names. We have 11 giveaways. You just pick them out and then I'll read them in a minute. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Thank you. These giveaways are provided by some of our local small businesses that are run by the sisters in our community. The first one we have for Sister Saima Salah, Arabic calligraphy. That goes to the first name, Maha Al-Budi. The table is here on the side, so you can just go over to the table and they will give you your giveaway. We have another one from Sister Saima Salah. It's from their business, Shah and Zach. paint your own calligraphy kits. And this is, the winner for that is Rana Latif. Right. Next we have an Avon representative in the Masjid, Sister Ambreen Abdali. So she is giving 2 giveaways. Actually, no, sorry. My fault. There was 3. Before we do that one, for Saima Salah, there was a couple of more. So we have Hiba Alami. Then we have Misbah Kashif. Tasneem Mansouri. I lost track. Tasneem Mansouri. Hold on a second. Sister Tasneem is getting from the Avon representative, from Ambreen Abdali, she's getting that takeaway. And then Sister Fadia Darwish gets another from our Avon representative. From Fadia Darwish. Is she here? Say again. Fadia Darwish. Okay, hold on. We'll come back to the Fadia. Sister Nisba is getting from the souk hijabs. And also from the souk is going to be Sister Shaliza Mirza. And then one more for the souk is Siddiqui T. Is there a Siddiqui T? Okay. And the souk is also giving giveaways to the volunteers here today from the YM sisters and Dar-ul-Islah juniors who volunteered. So thank you to them. Next we have Modesty Styles. They are giving three giveaways. One to Rabia Usmani. Sister Sehrish Afzal. And Lubna Omar. Lubna Omar. She left. You're pick another one. And so instead of Lubna Omar, we'll do Fatin Al-Jaludi. Sister Fatin here? Al-Jaludi? Oh. Modesty Styles is also giving some free gifts to our volunteers. And then Modesty Styles is giving a very special giveaway to someone very special in our audience today. We have a young sister who is new to Islam. She is only 14 years old, and she accepted Islam a couple of weeks ago. So Modesty Styles is giving Lila Kelly a $200 gift certificate to shop at their store. You can come up, Lila. You can go back down. Lila's here today with her mom and grandmother as well. We call the name, it seems like she's not here, so this is for another Avon. And this goes to Novi Sataidi. Sataidi. Before we move on to the Q&A, we also want to thank the YM sisters, Sister Shamaila Ambreen and PJ Delights, for providing the dessert that we will enjoy later this evening. And we just want to thank all the volunteers in general who helped set it up, because I think we've all been to events here, but I came and I was like, it's so pretty, just like Dr. Suzy Ismail was saying. I've never seen the tea cart look that beautiful. We also just want to mention another sponsor, AKZ Butterflies. Don't want to forget them as well. We'll move on to Q&A. We'll take some of the written questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor.
All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I think we need another huge takbir to our sister Layla. Allahu Akbar, MashaAllah. So I think, Layla, one of the most beautiful things about being in a gathering like this is recognizing that you literally have a whole wide world of sisters now that are part of your life, inshallah. So may Allah Azza wa Jal bless your journey, bless your mom, bless your grandma, bless your family, inshallah, and allow you to have the utmost contentment and gratitude and happiness in this dunya and akhirah, inshallah. All right, so we got two questions here, and then we'll open it up to everyone for verbal questions. And I think these are great questions because it brings us now to the practical, which I was hoping, our Q&A would take us to. So the first question says, when I'm in a disagreement, and I'm thinking this may be coming from either a mom or a daughter, when we're in a disagreement, how do we control our anger or our frustration in order to solve the issue? And alhamdulillah, I'm glad this has been brought up because if you are like me, I grew up in a household of, we were four sisters. So four sisters, my mom and my father. So lots of girls. And we all know that there are certain times where we may be a bit more emotional, where we may be a bit more sensitive. And this is the way that Allah Azza wa Jal has created us, right? We also know that when our emotions are running high, our responses may be less than rational. And oftentimes, when there is a point of disagreement, when we're not connecting as a mother and a daughter on something, and again, I love the example that was brought up here with the skit, the daughter wanting to go somewhere, the mother saying no, the mother basically coming from a place of, I'm worried about your safety, this is unfamiliar to me. And again, we often parent from a place of fear, which can be very harmful, because we don't want to parent our children from a place of fear. Right? We want to parent our children from a place of love, a place of tawakkul, a place of understanding and compassion. Now, in that moment when the mom and daughter were disagreeing, they both got angry, they both got frustrated. Now, we know that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised the man who came to him and said, how can I be the best person possible? How can I be better in my deen? And he said, do not become angry. And then the man asked, okay, then what? What else can I do? And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam repeated again, do not become angry. And a third time he asked, okay, what else? And again he said, do not become angry. And what's so important to recognize in the understanding of this narration is that it's not don't feel anger. Because anger is a human emotion that we will all feel at some times. But it is do not become angry, which means do not act in anger. Because the acting in anger is what happens when we say words that we can never take back. When we act in ways that are harmful. even physically at times, when we do things from a place that is pure emotion, that is fueled by this negative rage rather than rationale and logic and calmness, parenting again from a place of love and compassion and understanding rather than from fear. So in that moment of anger, first of course we want to follow the advice of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We often give our children a timeout when they're young, right? If they're having a tantrum, they're getting frustrated, we're like, that's it, go to your room, right? And I think even the mom's response in the skit was, go to your room, right? And the idea is we want them to take some time to cool off. But a lot of times as mothers, as parents, we don't give ourselves a timeout. So when there is a disagreement, if there is that feeling of anger, frustration, that feeling like you're not hearing me, just stop. Don't try to fight through it. Don't try to rationalize it in that moment, right? Take that time out. Follow the advice of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Make wudu to cool off. If you are standing, sit down, right? If you're sitting down, lie down. Change your position. But do not respond in that moment of anger and frustration. But also give it a specified time. So your child who's like, I want to go to prom, I want to go to prom, I want to go to prom. And as a mother, you're like, nope, you're not going to go, not going to happen, over my dead body, astaghfirullah, what did I do to deserve a kid like you, right? And we're going on and on like this. In that moment, right, you're not going to resolve anything. Take that time out. Tell your child, let's pause this here. As the child, as the daughter, say, you know what, we're not getting anywhere. Let's stop for a moment, right? Give it a specified time and say, you know what, let's go pray 2 rak'ahs and maybe after prayer we can sit and talk about it. Let's take a few minutes where we both cool off. Let's get a drink of water. Let's set a time tomorrow where we can talk about this, right? And that's so important to make sure that you're giving that specific timed moment where there's going to be a response. Because otherwise, if you say something like, inshallah, we'll talk about it, or it depends on what your father has to say, right? You're not giving the child also a reassurance that this will be resolved. And as the child, again, a lot of our children, through young adulthood and beyond even, will see an exhibition of anxious attachment, meaning wanting to know now, right? But tell me now, right? And maybe the words change a little as they get older, but there tends to be an insistence on in the moment. Don't give in to that insistence because it will not be productive. Pause. Take that time, step away. Oftentimes when there is this type of a disagreement, many people will also report that they feel anxious in the moment, right? Both the mother and the daughter may feel a sense of anxiety because they feel like the outcome is not going to be what they want. And a lot of times when we feel that sense of anxiety, we need to use some calming mechanisms to bring down those elements within our body that are causing disruption. And so one of the methods that I often like to teach, people who are struggling maybe with anger, frustration, or high emotions in terms of lack of emotional control in difficult situations, is a method known as the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And mothers, I want you to practice this with your daughters. Daughters, I want you to practice this with your mothers. Okay? And all it consists of is when you are feeling agitated, when you are feeling upset, frustrated, angry, anxious, just stop. And look around and identify 5 things you can see. And I often tell my clients, save on your phone like a verse from the Quran that brings you peace. Maybe لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, or عسى أن تكرهوا شيئا فهو خير لكم. Something that brings you a sense of calm. Save a picture maybe that brings you a sense of calm, a picture of a happy moment in your life, right? Something that brings down that level of anxiety that you might be feeling. Take a look around and you might identify and say, okay, I see the lights above me, right? You might look at your phone and say, I see this verse from the Quran. I see the pink table. So 5 things that you can see. Then it's going to be 4 things you can touch, because you're engaging all of your senses in order to calm down the invisible energy that's causing the frustration and the anxiety. So 4 things you can touch. And subhanAllah, one of the aspects that this was published actually in a journal in 2013. that showed if you touch with pressure on these pressure points, the uqla of the fingers, the back of each of the knuckles, and when you push on these knuckles, and this was in the Journal of Psychiatry, I believe, in 2013 it was published, that if you push on each of these knuckles, it actually acts like acupuncture and releases the calming hormones within the body to de-escalate the negative emotions you may be feeling. And what is this reminiscent of? What? The tasbih, exactly. And subhanAllah, when we look at the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the narration that teaches us of this tasbih, we see that it was Fatima radiallahu anha who was feeling a sense of overwhelm. And she spoke to her father, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and told him, there's too much work. I feel overwhelmed. There's too much for me to do. I need help. I need someone that can help me. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam told her, shall I not teach you something that is better than the help of others? And he taught her the tasbih, to say subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. And this was how many years before this study was published in 2013, that pushing on the fingers while reciting a positive mantra can actually calm the body down. So in that moment of frustration, you've looked around, you've seen 5 things, now it's 4 things you're going to touch. Start with the tasbih. Do it together, mother and daughter, right? Go through that. Then after you're feeling the touch of that, you might want to feel something else where you say, okay, I feel how hard this table is. I feel how soft my clothing is. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can smell. So at this point now, you want to take deep breaths, right? A lot of times they tell you if you're frustrated, if you're angry, take deep breaths. But the mind isn't ready to process that until you guide it through the senses. So as you're inhaling, you're smelling whatever it is around you. Hopefully you've got some bukhur maybe, a nice scent that brings a sense of calm, and you're letting it out in what we call an H breath, which comes from the back of the throat. And you're doing that 3 times. Then after the something you can smell, the 3 things you can smell, it's 2 things you can hear. So in that moment, it shouldn't be your angry voices that you're hearing, right? So maybe you play some Quran, maybe you listen to something that is calming. So 2 things you can hear, and the last one is super important, which is 1 thing you can taste. Because when we have a baby that's fussy or that's crying, we give them the pacifier because the sucking movement of the mouth brings a sense of calm. When we get older, we tend to forget the usage of that calming mechanism. And so when you place something on your tongue, I usually recommend like a Sour Patch gummy or a Warhead, but some people will use like chili peppers or ice, something that's going to cause your mouth to mimic that sucking motion. And you will find that that level of anger that was maybe at like a 10 has come down to like a 2 or a 3. So that's kind of a long-winded way, but get calm first. Do not try to work through the anger. Do not try to work through the frustration. You may not come to the perfect agreement, but again, I'm going to reference that skit. Find the middle road with your child. Offer alternatives. So the child who's like, but I want to go to prom, right? Now you're both in a calmer state of mind. This is where you want to ask, why? What is it about prom that's drawing you to it? How could we replicate what you're looking for? Maybe the girl says, I want to get dressed up. I want to do my hair. I want to do my makeup. I want to hang out with my friends. So can you, as a mother, maybe set up another type of a party? And we did this years ago in our local high school, where we did a morp instead of a prom, where the girls could get together, get dressed up, and enjoy their time together without the aspects of the prom that would not align. So finding an alternative and finding the middle road, but only when you're calm, because it's not going to work when the anger is there. Okay, I'm going to answer the next question a little bit faster than that, so we can get to more. If there are some traits in each other that we would want the other person to improve, how can we go about doing this without seeming rude or nagging? Okay, great. So as daughters, there's going to be things that your mothers do that drive you crazy. And as mothers, there's going to be lots of things that your daughters do that drive you crazy, right? And this is part of building a relationship, right? It's part of being able to empathize and connect and understand the other person. So definitely, I like the premise that says, how do you do it without seeming rude or nagging? Again, we look to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to better understand the process of nasiha. And we know ad-dinu nasiha, right? Our religion is one of sincerity that is based on giving that sincere advice. So yes, when we find that maybe our daughter is doing something or acting in a way that it's, and I'm not talking about like the halal or the haram, but something, maybe the way that she's studying is not the way you like, or maybe the room is a mess, right? Something that you feel like, oh, this is not something that's positive, I want her to improve this, right? And vice versa, if the daughter sees something with the mother. First of all, we always talk about the rule of 5, all right? For every one element of improvement that you are suggesting, begin with 5 positives. 5 positives. So start by telling your daughter maybe, hey, I appreciate that today when you woke up in the morning, you took care of your little sister and you let me sleep in a little bit. I also really love the fact that you hit the books hard and you've been studying all day. I realize what a hard worker you are and that inshallah you are going to be successful in all of your schoolwork. So I've given about 4 or 5 now. Then I might say something like, but after you're done studying, I see your books are everywhere and the room is quite a mess. What do you think we can do about it? So again, asking the daughter to lead towards that self-improvement with her own perception and her perspective. And she might be like, it's fine, it looks fine, I don't know what you're talking about, right? And then in that moment, right, you're gonna want to gently encourage and say, well look, like if we move these books to this side here, doesn't it make so much more room on the table? Or something of that sort. And the daughter, the same thing to the mother. Maybe mom, is always reminding you to clean your room. And it gets to the point where you're like, oh my goodness, like it's clean, right? So being able to tell your mom, I love the fact that you want the house to be spotless. Like you do such a good job of making sure everything is so clean for us. And I really appreciate that, right? And you give the positives and then you say, but mom, it hurts me when you always come into my room and you criticize the way it looks. I'm doing my best to try to clean it up and to make it look nicer than it was before. So lead with the 5 positives, provide the improvement as a nasiha and as guidance rather than as forceful nagging or criticism.
We do have another question. Someone was asking about Cornerstone and how they can make an appointment, and if you could just a little bit about Cornerstone.
All right, Jazakallah khair for that question. I actually just pulled out a few cards for our centers. So we are an international organization. We do have several offices throughout New Jersey. Most of them are in Central and South Jersey, but we do provide televisits and phone sessions as well. We provide faith-based relational intervention programs and sessions, which means it's an alternative form of therapeutic intervention, an alternative form of counseling that focuses on spiritual, psycho-socio-emotional wellness, which means we don't neglect the Islamic aspect. So all of our counseling comes from the Islamic perspective, guided by the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Quran, and we focus on rebuilding relationships. So when we have, for example, a teen maybe who comes to one of our offices, or we have a televisit with them, and that teen is struggling. Maybe the teen is struggling with sexuality, with identity, with faith, with just friends, anxiety, depression, things that the teenager may be struggling with. Our goal is not to replace the parents or the family as a support system. Our goal is to be able to guide that individual through the difficulty they're going through, while also guiding the parents and the family towards a better relationship. So it's very much family focused and focused on the idea of collectivism, where it's not one person alone that's going to fix the struggles they're going through, but that it takes more. And you can definitely learn more about Cornerstone by taking one of our cards and visiting our websites.
We have time for one question. So it's first hand I saw. Do you want to?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Halaqas, and I'm so pleased to come to this event. And I just want to, give my shout out to Dr. Suzy. She made a beautiful speech today, and it made me very emotional, and it touched a lot of spots. So I just wanted to say that. And also, Surah Al-Baqarah was also very beautiful. That was recited by our young sister as well. So my question is, and I wanted to have this question and vocalize this question for about 25 years now, and this is my chance. Now, I am Egyptian and raised in America, first generation. And I've been here now for 50 years. and my family, now went back home, and, I'm here. They left me behind. But my question is, when I do visit Egypt, I am Egyptian, so I'm only asking this question from my experience from the Egyptian culture. So I'm not sure it resonates with the other cultures, but I'm saying it from the perspective of the Egyptian culture. Now, my concern and my confusion is, Egypt, as everyone knows, is an Islamic country. There are rules and regulations that comes from the government to the people, comes from the Islamic perspective. So the laws are based out of the Quran. Now, here is the disconnect. When I see the culture, now the culture is extremely opposite of what the Islamic rules say. And when you say, well, why you do this? Oh, it's aib. Aib means it's inappropriate. But they don't say haram. But it supersedes the laws of Islam. So our culture is very powerful, and they do things that take advantage of women. Now, my question to Suzy, how do you penetrate, how do you overcome that, and you try to explain, well, this is not correct, this is haram, and the culture says, no, it is correct. So how do you now engage in that, and how do you overcome them for them to see that what they're doing is wrong? And this is not just one family, this is the whole country.
All right, Jazakallah khair for asking that question and for the comments. So I think you bring up such a good point, which is, what do we do when the culture of our families or back home really overrides what we know is Islamically correct? And that, that aib, that it's shameful, is something that we hear often across cultures. Or what will people say? That's often something that we hear as well. And we know that that is not aligned with the Islamic perspective of, what will Allah Azza wa Jal decide, that Allah is the judge. But the reality is that our deen does have a characteristic that is central to it, which is the characteristic of hayat. Right? And that hayat means carrying ourselves with that sense of modesty, and that there are going to be times where maybe there is something that is a breach of hayat that a parent identifies, or, again, I don't want to generalize, but let's say, something with clothing that a parent identifies, this is a breach of hayat, right? And it may not be a moment where they're able to say, this is haram, because the child may say, well, I'm covered, everything is covered, but there's a breach of hayat. If the parent is saying, what will people say? This becomes a cultural aspect, right? But if they are explaining, the concept of haya, and I think that's really the answer to the question. It's education, it's explaining, it's being able to talk to the family back home that is highlighting the aib or the shameful rather than highlighting the halal and the haram, to explain to them that, well, Islamically, this is where this is coming from. Or if you look at the sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is where it's coming from. And I'll give you an example, like something like, women shouldn't work, for example, or women shouldn't be in male spaces, right? If we know our deen, we know that Nusayba radiallahu anha, who was one of the companions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was on the battlefield with the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in authentic narration, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that everywhere he turned, she was there standing with a shield and a sword in front of him. It doesn't get more male-centric than a battlefield. So when we tell our daughters, or when our mothers tell us, you can't be an engineer because that's a male field, or you can't go into computer science because that's for guys, this is definitely not of our deen. This is something that's cultural. And it's something that we see, again, across cultures. So going back to our Islamic heritage, to understand what it means to be a woman, to understand and really recognize the female companions that surrounded the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll give you another example. One of my favorite kind of journeys in life of a female companion is of Ash-Shifa bint Abdullah. And Ash-Shifa bint Abdullah was actually, her name was Layla before she was given the nickname Ash-Shifa by the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Layla was known to be a very strong woman at the time of Jahiliyyah and even when she accepted Islam. But she also had very special skills. She knew how to read and write, and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked her to teach Hafsa, his wife, how to read and write. So she was a teacher. She was also what would be considered a doctor at that time because she would heal the ant bites that men would receive when they would be out in the desert, and she had these concoctions. And this is why the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave her the nickname Ash-Shifa, which means the healer. So she was a teacher, she was a doctor. She also became the first market controller. She was assigned by Umar radiallahu anhu under his Khalifa to be in the marketplace, the one who would decide the ethical elements of dealing in the market. So she was a teacher, a doctor, a businesswoman. She also was a mother and a wife. And her children were both Huffaz, who were among the foremost companions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam as they grew older. So when we limit our daughters, when we tell our girls, or when we limit ourselves and say, as a woman, you can't do X, Y, Z, if it is not coming from our rich Islamic heritage, if we are not following the deen, then we're erring on the side of culture, which we want to stay away from and focus instead on returning to our deen.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suzy Ismail. We have a little thank you for you. We also want to thank all of you for joining us here tonight. We want to thank Dar-ul-Islah Management for helping us organize this, YM Sisters and Dar-ul-Islah Sisters. We hope you all enjoyed and benefited. There are other programs that we have. Coming up, especially with Ramadan coming. Welcome Ramadan programs, March 4th, 11th, and 18th. We have Fiqh of Som with Sheikh Osama Saliha after Zohar. March 10th, we have Imam Suhaib Webb coming. The topic is building